The last text Margot ever sent me said, "You always thought you were better than me. Now you know how it feels." I read it, standing in the middle of my empty shop, with the shelves half bare and a cancellation notice taped to the door. And I understood, finally and completely, that the woman I had called my best friend for 15 years had been dismantling my life one secret at a time. I had given her every piece of it. She had used every piece. My name is Naomi Whitfield. I am 38 years old. I own a bookshop in a small town in the north of England, a real bookshop, the kind with a reading nook and a coffee machine, and a cat that the regulars know by name. I am a widow. My husband, Tom, died 2 years ago, suddenly, of a heart condition no one knew he had. I have a daughter named Lily, who is 11 and who has Tom's laugh, which undoes me every single time I hear it. I met Margot 15 years ago, when we were both 23, and both new to the town, and both, in our different ways, lonely. We met at a book club that neither of us ever attended again after the first night, because we discovered we would rather talk to each other. She was clever and funny, and she had a way of making you feel that your ordinary troubles were worthy of serious attention. I had never had a friend like that. I thought I was lucky. For a long time, I thought I was lucky. I need to tell you what I told Margot, because the things I told her are the bricks she built with. Over 15 years, I told her everything. I told her about the money troubles in the early years of the shop, the months I couldn't pay suppliers, the loan I took that I never told Tom about. I told her about the affair I nearly had, 8 years ago, when the marriage was difficult. Nearly, not actually, but I had wanted to, and I had confessed the wanting to Margot, and to no one else. I told her about Tom's death, the real version. That we had argued the night before he died. That the last thing I ever said to my husband was something unkind about money, and that I had carried that guilt for 2 years like a stone sewn into my coat. I told her about Lily's struggles after Tom died, the counseling, the bad year at school. I told her about the antidepressants I started taking and stopped telling people about. I told her all of it. She was the one I told. For 15 years she received these confessions the way you would want a friend to receive them, with warmth, without judgment, with the right words at the right time. She would say, "You did the best you could." She would say, "Tom knew you loved him." She would say, "You're a good mother, Naomi. Look at Lily. Look how she's coming through." I believed her. I leaned on her. After Tom died, she was at my house 3 times a week. She organized the funeral flowers. She held my hand in the front pew. I want to be honest about something, because it matters to what comes after. I loved Margot. Not the way you love a sister, exactly, but something close to it, the chosen kind, the kind you build over years out of shared time and accumulated trust. I would have said, a year ago, that she was the most important adult relationship in my life after Tom. I would have trusted her with Lily. I would have trusted her with anything. I did trust her with everything. That was the problem. I just didn't know it was a problem. The first thing happened in the spring. It was small. The shop ran a monthly event. A local author's evening, well attended, a nice fixture in the town's calendar. That spring, 3 days before the event, the venue I co-booked with the community hall received an anonymous email. It said I had financial irregularities in my business and suggested the hall reconsider its association with me. The booking was quietly canceled. The event didn't happen. No one would tell me exactly why. I was confused more than alarmed. Financial irregularities. I thought of the early years, the unpaid suppliers, the secret loan, all long resolved, all years in the past, all things only a handful of people knew about. I told myself it was a misunderstanding, a competitor maybe, someone with a grudge I couldn't identify. I told Margot about it over wine that Friday. She was sympathetic. She said, "That's awful. Who would do something like that?" She refilled my glass. She said, "Don't let it get to you." I didn't. Not then. The second thing happened a month later, and it was not small. There was a position on the board of the town's literary festival, a volunteer role, but a meaningful one. The kind of thing that mattered to me and to the shop's standing in the community. I had been all but promised it. Then, A week before the appointment, the festival chair asked to meet me for coffee. She was kind but uncomfortable. She said concerns had been raised about my suitability. She mentioned, carefully, my personal circumstances. I asked her what she meant by personal circumstances. She hesitated. Then she said someone had expressed worry that I was not in a stable place. Since my husband's death, that I was struggling, possibly using medication, possibly not coping. She said it gently, as though she were doing me a kindness. I sat there with my coffee going cold, and I thought, who knows about the medication? Who knows enough to describe me as not coping? The list of people who knew was very short. I did not let myself finish the thought. I went home and I sat in Tom's old armchair, which I had not been able to give away, and I made myself think the thought I had been refusing. The cancelled venue. The lost board position. Financial irregularities, not coping, medication. Every single one of those things was something I had told Margot. Not just Margot, but Margot was the only person who knew all of them. The only person who held the complete set. I sat in the armchair until it got dark and I did not turn on the light. I want to tell you how hard it is to suspect someone you love. It is not like suspecting a stranger. With a stranger, suspicion is clean. You follow the evidence. You draw conclusions. With someone you love, every piece of evidence is met by 15 years of counter-evidence. She held your hand at the funeral. She brought soup when Lily had the flu. She remembered your mother's birthday. The mind refuses. It says, not her, not her. There must be another explanation. I spent 2 weeks refusing. Then I stopped refusing and started watching. I did not confront her. I had learned, in the difficult years of running a business, that you do not accuse until you can prove. So I changed nothing on the surface. I still met Margot for wine on Fridays. I still texted her through the week. But I stopped telling her things. I gave her a version of my life with nothing real in it. The shop was fine. Lily was fine. I was tired but managing. And I watched what she did with the nothing I gave her. The answer, over the following weeks, was very illuminating. Because here is what I noticed. When I stopped feeding Margot real information, the attacks stopped. No more anonymous emails. No more concerns raised. The town went quiet around me, in a good way, in the way it had been quiet for years before the spring. It was as though a tap had been turned off. And the only thing that had changed was that I had stopped pouring my secrets into one specific person. I noticed this the way you notice a sound stopping by the sudden, conspicuous absence of it. To be sure, because I needed to be sure, because the cost of being wrong about this was the loss of the most important friendship of my adult life. I did something I am not proud of. I tested her. I told her one Friday, in confidence, lowering my voice the way you do when you share something that matters, that I had been approached about selling the shop, that a buyer had made an informal offer and I was tempted, that I hadn't told anyone, that I needed her advice. None of it was true. I invented all of it. I watched her face take it in. She was perfect, as always. She said, "Oh Naomi, that's huge. Are you sure?" She asked careful questions. She told me to take my time. She was the picture of a concerned friend receiving important news. I went home and I waited. I had told her the imaginary buyer's name, a name I made up entirely, a man called Gerald Price who did not exist. If that name surfaced anywhere in the town, in any context, I would know. It would mean the information had traveled, and there was only one route it could have traveled by. 9 days later, a regular customer mentioned, in passing, over the coffee machine, that she'd heard I might be selling up. I kept my face still. I asked lightly, where she'd heard that. She said she wasn't sure it was going around. Someone had mentioned a buyer, a man. She thought the name was Price, Gerald Price. I thanked her and I went into the back room and I stood with my hands flat on the cold metal of the sink and I breathed very slowly. The name I invented had reached my shop counter in 9 days. Now I knew. Now I knew for certain. I want to describe what certainty felt like, because it was not what I expected. I had expected rage. Instead I felt a terrible cold clarity, and underneath it, grief so large I could not look at it directly. 15 years. Every confession, every Friday, every held hand. All of it had been, for her, raw material. She had not been my friend, listening to my troubles. She had been a collector, gathering my vulnerabilities one at a time, storing them, waiting to use them. I had handed her the weapons and then been surprised by the wounds. I called the one person I trusted entirely, my sister, B, who lives 2 hours away, and who had never liked Margot, for reasons she had never fully articulated, and that I had always dismissed as B being protective. I told her everything, the venue, the board, the test, the name. B was quiet for a long time, then she said, "I always knew there was something." I could never say what. "She watched you, Naomi. Whenever I was there, she watched you the way you watch something you're measuring." I said, "Why didn't you tell me?" She said, "Because I had nothing, just a feeling." You don't end a friendship over a feeling. B drove up the next weekend. We sat at my kitchen table after Lily was in bed, and we tried to understand it, the why of it, which was harder than the what. B said, "People like Margot need someone to feel above, and you, without meaning to, were always slightly above her. The shop, the marriage, even your grief, you carried it with a kind of dignity." I think she couldn't stand it. I said, "I never thought I was above her." B said, "I know. That's exactly why she couldn't bear you. You had it without trying. She wanted it and couldn't get it." I thought about that for days. The idea that my ordinary life, the life I experienced from the inside as a constant negotiation with difficulty, had looked from Margot's chair, like ease, like having it without trying. I thought about how she had positioned herself, always the supporter, never the one supported, always the one with the wisdom, the right words, the steady hand. And I understood that the whole structure of our friendship had been built so that she was always the giver, and I was always the one in need. My crises kept her on top, so she made more of them. That was the part that took the longest to accept. Not that she had used my secrets, that was almost comprehensible, in a cold way. But that she had needed me to be in trouble. That my struggles had been useful to her, had given her a role, had kept the friendship in the shape she required. When Tom died and I leaned on her completely, she was at her happiest. I remembered, suddenly, how present she had been in that first year, 3 times a week, organizing, hovering. I had read it as devotion. It was something else. It was harvest. I needed to know how far it had gone. The venue, the board, those were the things I could see. But Margot had 15 years of material, and I had no way of knowing what else she had done with it. What conversations had happened in rooms I wasn't in? What version of me existed in the town that I had never met? I started, carefully, to ask, not directly. I would mention things to trusted regulars, to old friends, and watch for the flinch. The small hesitation that told me they had heard a version of me that didn't match the one in front of them. I want to say more about the year Tom died, because Margot's behavior in it is the part I understand least, and forgive least. In those first raw months, she was constant, a presence at my kitchen table, a hand on my arm, a voice on the phone at midnight, when I couldn't breathe. I have replayed that year 100 times since, looking for the seam, the moment the comfort became collection. I never find a single seam. It was woven through the whole of it. She comforted me and harvested me in the same gesture, and I could not tell the two apart, because to me they looked identical. That is the genius of it, and the horror. There is a question people ask, gently, when I tell them pieces of this. They ask, how could you not have seen it? 15 years. And I understand the question, because I have asked it of myself more harshly than anyone else ever could. But here is the answer I have arrived at. You do not see it because seeing it requires you to believe that someone who holds your hand at a funeral could be measuring you while they do it. And most of us cannot believe that, because most of us would never do it. We assume others are built as we are built. Margot relied on that assumption. It is the assumption of a decent person, and it is exactly the door a predator walks through. There were more flinches than I wanted to find. A friend who had cooled toward me a year ago, For reasons I had never understood, it turned out she had heard that I had nearly had an affair, that I was not as devoted to Tom as everyone thought. A supplier who had become difficult. He had heard rumors about my finances, about unpaid debts, about a business in trouble. Each rumor was built from a true thing I had told Margot, distorted just enough to wound. She had taken the truth and bent it into the worst possible shape, then released it. The cruelest one I found by accident. Lily came home from school one day, quiet in a way she rarely was, and eventually told me that a girl in her class had said her mom was going mad since her dad died, that I was on pills and couldn't look after her properly. Lily was 11 and frightened in asking me, in the careful way children ask the questions they're scared of, whether it was true that I couldn't look after her. I held her and I told her it was not true, that I would always look after her. But inside, something turned to stone. Margot had reached my daughter. That was the night the grief turned into something harder. Up to that point, I had been managing this as a kind of investigation, clinical, careful, the way you handle a wound you can't afford to let bleed. But when it reached Lily, when my daughter came home frightened because of a rumor traceable to the woman who had wept at my husband's funeral, the cold clarity gained an edge. I did not become reckless, but I became certain in a new way. I was not only going to understand what Margot had done, I was going to make her stop, and I was going to make it cost her. I went to see a solicitor, a woman named Priya Shah, recommended by B. Sharp and calm and entirely without sentiment. I laid it all out, the anonymous email to the venue, the concerns raised at the festival, the invented buyer's name that had traveled, the rumors I had traced. Priya listened without interrupting and took notes in a small precise hand. When I finished, she said, "Some of this is actionable, some of it isn't. The difference is provability. What can you put a name to? What's just a feeling?" I said. "The buyer's name. Gerald Price. I made him up. Only Margot had that name." Priya looked up. She said, "That's good. That's a controlled test, and the result is clean. But it proves she repeats things. It doesn't yet prove she sent the anonymous email or raised the festival concerns. For that, you need a document, a witness, something that puts her hand on the specific act." I said, "How do I get that?" She said, "Carefully and legally. Don't do anything that crosses a line, because the moment you do, the story stops being about what she did and starts being about what you did. Stay clean. Let her be the one in the wrong. Stay clean. Let her be the one in the wrong." I held on to that, in the weeks that followed, like a railing on a dark staircase, because the temptation, when someone has done this to you, is to descend to their methods, to fight secrets with secrets, rumor with rumor. I understood the appeal of it. I understood how a person becomes what was done to them. And I decided, very deliberately, that I would not out of virtue, out of strategy, and out of something deeper. The knowledge that if I became Margot to defeat Margot, she would have taken the last thing I had, myself. The break I needed came from the festival chair, the woman who had told me, gently, about the concerns over my suitability. Her name was Eleanor, and she had felt uneasy about the whole thing since. When I went to her, honestly, and told her I believed I had been the target of a deliberate campaign by someone close to me, she was troubled. She said, "The concern about your stability, it came to me in an email." I said, "From whom?" She said, "It was framed as confidential. From a concerned member of the community." I said, "Do you still have it?" She said, "I think so." Eleanor found the email. It had been sent from an anonymous address, a generic account, no name attached. But Eleanor, going back through it, remembered something. She had replied to that email, once, asking a clarifying question. And the reply she received had contained a phrase, a specific, unusual phrase about my late husband, about how Tom would have been ashamed of what she's become. I went very still when Eleanor read it to me. Because that phrasing would have been ashamed, was Margot's. It was a thing she said. It was a thing she had said to me, once, as comfort, twisted now into a blade. It wasn't proof a court would accept on its own, a turn of phrase, a feeling of recognition. But it was another stone in a wall that was becoming solid. Priya, when I brought it to her, said the anonymous email could potentially be traced through the platform that hosted the account, with the right legal process, if it came to that. She also said something that stayed with me. She said, "You have enough now to confront her, if you want to. Not enough to be certain of winning in court, but enough that she know you know, and enough that you won't be guessing. The question is what you want, court or an ending." What did I want? I sat with that question for a long time. I did not want money. There was no money in this. I did not particularly want a courtroom. Years of process, my private griefs read aloud in a public record. What I wanted was harder to name. I wanted it to stop. I wanted the town to know the truth, or at least the people who mattered to me. I wanted Lily safe from the rumors. And I wanted, this was the part I was least proud of and most certain of, I wanted to look Margot in the eye and have her understand that I knew exactly what she was, that the performance was over. I arranged to meet her. I chose the wine bar where we had met every Friday for 15 years, not for sentiment, but because I wanted to do this in the place that held the most evidence of what I'd believed we were. I texted her, light and ordinary, drink Friday. She replied within minutes, the same as always. Of course, our usual time. Our usual time. I read those words and I thought about how many usual times there had been, and how every single one of them had been something other than what I thought. I put my phone down. I prepared. I did not sleep the night before, but I was not frightened. I was something colder than frightened. I went over what I would say, and then I put the script away, because I knew that the only way to do this was to be fully present and let it be what it was. I got Lily off to school in the morning. I ran the shop. I did the ordinary things with the ordinary care, and underneath them the day moved towards 7 o'clock like a tide coming in. At 6, I closed the shop. At 6:40, I walked to the wine bar. Margot was already there, at our table, 2 glasses of wine already poured. She looked up and smiled when she saw me, and the smile was so warm, so entirely without guilt, that for one vertiginous second I doubted everything. That is the power of a person like Margot. Even knowing what I knew, even holding the proof, her smile could make me question my own certainty. I sat down. She slid a glass toward me and said, "You look tired. Is it the shop? Tell me everything. Tell me everything." The 3 words she had been saying to me for 15 years. I understood now that they had never been an offer of comfort. They had always been a request for supply. I did not pick up the glass. I said, "I'm not going to tell you anything, Margot. I came to tell you what I know." Something flickered across her face, there and gone, the smallest break in the surface. She kept her voice easy. She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Gerald Price." I watched it land. I watched her understand, in real time, that the name meant something, and then watch her try to work out what. I said, "There's no buyer. There never was. I invented him 2 weeks ago, and gave the name only to you. It was on my shop counter in 9 days. So let's not pretend." The change in her was extraordinary to witness. The warmth did not vanish all at once. It drained, the way color drains from something, leaving behind a face I had never quite seen before. Watchful. "Calculating, Oler," she said, after a pause. "I don't know what you think that proves." I said, "It proves you repeat things I tell you in confidence. And it's not the only thing. The venue, the festival, the rumors about the affair, the money, the pills, the thing a child said to my daughter in a playground. I've traced all of it, Margot. It all leads to one person." She was quiet for a moment. And then she did the thing I had not expected. The thing that told me more than any confession could have. She did not deny it. She did not gasp or protest or perform the hurt of a wrongly accused friend. She simply looked at me, and something hardened in her, and she said, "You don't know what it's like to sit across from you, year after year, while everything just works out for you. The shop, Tom, even when he died, people rallied around you. Do you know what it's like to watch that? To never be the one people rally around?" I said. "Tom died, Margot," she said. "I know Tom died." I said, "You sat in the front pew. You held my hand. Was that real, or were you collecting? For the first time, she looked away. She said, "It was real. At the time. And then afterwards everyone was so worried about you, so gentle with you. And she stopped. I said, 'You wanted some of that.' She said nothing, which was its own answer. I had grieved my husband, and my best friend had been jealous of the comfort I received for it. There is a particular kind of cold that comes with understanding that. I said, 'Here is what is going to happen. You are going to stop. Today, every rumor, every email, every word about me or my daughter or my business, it stops now,' she said, or what? There was a challenge in it, the first openly hostile thing she had said in 15 years. I said, 'Or I take what I have to a solicitor,' which I have already done, by the way. I have the test with the name. I have the email to the festival, which can be traced. I have the phrase you used, the one about Tom being ashamed, which a witness will recognize. I have a pattern, documented, dated, and I am entirely willing to use it." I watched her weigh it. I could see her doing the calculation she must have done 1,000 times in 15 years, the assessment of risk, of advantage, of what she could get away with. And I watched her arrive at the understanding that this time the calculation came out against her. She said, finally, in a flat voice with all the warmth gone out of it, "You'd really do that? To me? After everything?" I said, "After everything, yes." She said, "I don't recognize you." I said, "No, you don't. Because you only ever knew the version of me that needed you. This is the other one." She gathered her coat, she stood, and at the door of the wine bar, the place we had met every Friday for 15 years, she turned and delivered the last words she would ever say to me. She said, "You always thought you were better than me." Then she left, and later that night the text arrived, the same words, with an addition. "You always thought you were better than me. Now you know how it feels." I read it standing in my kitchen, and I understood that she still, even now, even at the end, believed she was the wronged one. That she would believe it forever. Some people are sealed inside their own version. There is no door in from outside. I did not reply. I sat at the kitchen table with the phone face down and Lily asleep upstairs, and the house very quiet around me. And I let myself feel, for the first time without holding it at arm's length, the full size of what I had lost. Not the friendship. The friendship had never been what I thought, so there was nothing real there to lose. What I had lost was 15 years of my own trust. 15 years of confessions poured into a vessel I believed was safe. The grief was not for Margot. It was for the version of myself who had loved her, openly and without suspicion, and who would never quite exist again. In the weeks that followed, I did not go to court. I want to be honest about that, because I know it is not the satisfying ending. I had the evidence, or enough of it, and Priya was ready. And there was a version of this where I pursued it all the way and made Margot answer publicly for what she'd done. I chose not to. Not because she didn't deserve it, she did. But because a court case would have meant living inside this for years. Dragging Lily through it, turning my private wounds into public exhibits. I had a daughter to raise and a life to rebuild. I decided that my future was worth more than Margot's punishment. But I did not let her vanish unmarked. I did something quieter and, I think, more lasting. I told the truth carefully, to the people who mattered. I went to Eleanor at the festival and told her the whole story, with the evidence, and she was horrified, and she made sure the board knew. I told the friend who had cooled toward me, and watched her face change as she understood the affair rumor for what it was. One conversation at a time, I corrected the record, not with rumors of my own. With the truth, calmly told, backed by what I could prove. The town is small. The truth traveled the same roads the lies had. And the town did what small towns do, in the end. They closed around me, not Margot. The people who had been told things about me met the woman in front of them, the one running the shop, raising her daughter, showing up year after year, and they measured the rumor against the reality, and the reality won. Margot found, over the following months, that the rooms she had moved through so easily were a little cooler to her, that the confidences stopped flowing in her direction. That the role she had built her whole self around, the trusted one, the one everyone told things to, was quietly closing to her. She had lived by the harvest. The harvest failed. She left the town within the year. I heard it secondhand, the way I heard everything about her now, moved away, a fresh start somewhere, a clean slate among people who didn't know. I felt very little when I heard it. Not triumph, not even relief, exactly. Just the quiet registration of a fact, the way you note that a long illness has finally ended. She would do it again, somewhere else, to someone else. People like Margot do not change. They relocate, I hoped, without much hope, that wherever she went, someone would see her more clearly and sooner than I had. 15 years is a long time to be blind. I want to tell you about the rebuilding, because the destruction is only half the story, and it is not the half I want to leave you with. The shop survived. It nearly didn't. The cancelled events and the cooled relationships had cost me. There were months that year when I did the sums late at night and frightened myself. But it survived, because I fought for it, and because the regulars came back, and because a town that had nearly turned against me turned, instead, toward me. I learned, in that fight, that I was more capable than I had believed. Margot had needed me to be in trouble. It turned out I was very good at getting out of it. People sometimes ask whether I would warn my younger self, the 23-year-old who met a clever, funny woman at a book club and felt, for the first time in the town, less alone. I have decided I would not. Not because the warning wouldn't help, it might have saved me years, but because that young woman needed to learn to trust someone, and the trusting itself was not the mistake. The mistake was never checking, never noticing, never asking why the giving only ever flowed one way. You can keep your capacity to trust and still learn to watch the direction of the river. That is the whole lesson. I wish I had learned it sooner. I am glad I learned it at all. I learned to grieve the friendship as a separate thing from the betrayal, and that took longer than the betrayal itself to process. Because there were real moments. The night Lily was born, Margot drove through a storm to be there, and I will not pretend that wasn't real to me, whatever it was to her. The holiday we took the summer after Tom and I separated for those 3 terrible months, before we reconciled, she held me together. Those memories did not stop being mine when I learned what she was. I had to find a way to keep them without keeping her. I am still learning how. Some days I manage it. Some days the whole shelf falls. I kept the last text. People find that strange, that I would keep the message that blamed me for my own betrayal. But I keep it for the same reason I kept the truth instead of fighting with lies, because the record matters. On the hard nights, when the old habit reaches for the phone, or the grief insists the friendship must have been partly real, I read those words again. You always thought you were better than me. Now you know how it feels. And they remind me exactly who she was, and exactly what she could not give. The message she meant as a wound has become, instead, the clearest thing I own. The shop has a new fixture now, the one Margot's anonymous email canceled 3 springs ago. We brought the local authors' evening back, bigger than before, and the community hall hosts it without a second thought. The first one we held after everything, the room was full, and I stood at the front to introduce the writers, and I looked out at the faces, the regulars, the neighbors, Eleanor in the second row, B, who had driven up, Lily helping at the book table. I thought, this is the town she tried to turn against me. And here it is, in my room, on my night full. I did not cry, but it was close. I have thought a great deal about envy since this happened, because envy is the engine of the whole thing, and I had badly underestimated it. We treat envy as a small sin, a flicker, something that passes. But chronic envy, envy that settles in and makes a home, and waits, is one of the most dangerous forces a human being can carry. Precisely because it disguises itself as love. Margot did not hate me. I am certain of that. She loved me, and she envied me, and she could not separate the two, and so her love became a thing that needed me diminished. The people who will hurt you most are rarely the ones who hate you. They are the ones who love you, and cannot bear your light. Lily is 13 now, as I tell you this. The girl who came home frightened from a playground rumor is gone. replaced by someone taller and funnier and more certain of the ground beneath her. She helps in the shop on Saturdays. She has opinions about which books we should stock, and she is usually right. The other day a customer asked her if she was going to take over the place one day, and she said, without looking up, "It's my mum's shop." But maybe. I had to go into the back room for a moment. Margot wanted to make me smaller in this town. Instead, my daughter stands behind my counter and calls it ours. Lily came through too. The rumor at school faded the way playground rumors do, replaced by newer ones, and the truth that her mother was steady, present, and not going anywhere proved itself daily in a way no whisper could withstand. We talked about it, eventually, when she was old enough to hear more of it. I told her that someone I had trusted had said untrue things, and that it had hurt us, and that we had come through it together. She asked if I was still sad about it. I said, a little, but less every day. She said, like with Dad. I said, a bit like with Dad. Some things you carry, but they get lighter. She nodded. She understood. Bea and I are closer now than we have been since we were children. The thing with Margot broke something open between us. The distance that had grown in our adult years. The politeness that had replaced real closeness. When she drove up that weekend and sat at my kitchen table and said I always knew there was something, she gave me back a sister I had half forgotten I had. We speak every week now. She comes up once a month. Lily adores her. Out of the wreckage of one relationship I never really had, I recovered one I'd been neglecting and badly needed. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, a great deal. I think now about trust differently than I did. I do not trust less. I refuse to let Margot make me into a closed, suspicious person, because that would be a kind of victory for her, and she has had enough victories at my expense. But I trust differently. I have learned that the people who ask you to tell them everything are not always the safe ones. That real friendship does not require you to be in constant need. That the friend who is only ever the giver, never the one supported, may be keeping a ledger you cannot see. I watch for the ledger now. I did not know to watch for it before. I have a friend now, a new one, which at 38 is a rarer and more precious thing than people admit. Her name is Kath. She runs the flower shop 2 doors down. The friendship is slow and ordinary and entirely without intensity. And I have come to understand that this is exactly what makes it trustworthy. We do not pour our deepest secrets into each other over wine. We talk about the weather and our businesses and our children. We help each other carry things literally and otherwise. It is not the grand chosen sister bond I had with Margot. It is better. It is real. Because it does not need to be more than it is. On the 2nd anniversary of finding out, I mark it, quietly. The way you mark the things that changed you. I closed the shop early and walked to the hill above the town. The one Tom and I used to climb when we were first married. I sat on the bench at the top, where you can see the whole town laid out below. The streets and the rooftops, and somewhere down there my own small shop with its lit window. I thought about Margot, somewhere else now, starting again. I thought about everything she had taken and everything she had failed to take. And I found that the second list was much longer than the first. She took 15 years of my trust. She took the version of myself who confided freely. She took, for a while, my standing in the town and my peace of mind and nearly my shop. But she did not take Lily, who is safe and growing and laughing with her father's laugh. She did not take Bea, who came back to me. She did not take the shop, which survived. She did not take my truthfulness, because I refused to fight her with lies. And she did not take the thing she had wanted most. She did not make me smaller. She made me, against every intention she had, larger, clearer, harder to fool. More fully myself than I had ever been while I was busy being her supply. I will not pretend it doesn't still hurt. That is the honest ending, and I promised you honesty. Some nights, the wrong song plays, or I pass the wine bar, or I reach for my phone on a Friday out of 15 years of habit, and the grief comes back, fresh and specific. You do not fully recover from being known that completely by someone who meant you harm. The wound closes, but the scar is part of you now. I have made my peace with carrying it. It is the price of having loved someone openly, and I would rather pay that price than become someone who cannot love openly at all. If you are listening to this and you recognize something, a friend who is always there for your crises and oddly absent for your triumphs, who asks you to tell them everything and somehow knows everyone, whose support always seems to keep you slightly in their debt, I am not telling you to assume the worst. Most friends are real. Most are exactly what they seem. But I am telling you, pay attention to the ledger. Pay attention to who needs you to be in need. Notice if your secrets travel. Notice if the woman who is always above you in wisdom seems quietly glad when you are below her in fortune. Notice, I did not. For 15 years. If there is one thing I want you to carry away from this, it is not suspicion. Margot would be glad to have made the world more suspicious, one listener at a time, and I will not give her that. What I want you to carry is discernment, which is different. Suspicion assumes the worst of everyone. Discernment notices the specific, particular signs and weighs them honestly. Notice the friend who needs your need. Notice the support that always leaves you in debt. Notice whose secrets travel and who stay still. And then, this is the part that matters. Keep your heart open anyway, to the ones who pass the test. Most do. The open heart is worth the risk. I still believe that. She did not take that from me either. And if you have already been through it, if you have already sat in an empty room with a text that blamed you for your own betrayal, if you have already traced the lies back to the hand you trusted most, then I want you to hear the other half of what I learned. You will rebuild. The people who matter will measure the rumor against the reality of you. And the reality will win, because you will keep showing up and being who you are, and that is something no liar can sustain against. The harvest fails for them in the end. It failed for Margot, it will fail for yours. Keep showing up. That is the whole secret. Keep showing up as yourself. My name is Naomi Whitfield. I am 38 years old. I run a bookshop with a lit window in a small northern town, and I am raising a daughter with her father's laugh. And I have a sister who comes every month, and a new friend 2 doors down who is real because she does not need to be more than she is. I lost 15 years to someone who was never my friend. I will not lose the rest of my life to her too. That is the choice I make, every morning, when I unlock the shop and turn on the lights. Thank you for sitting with me through this story. If it reached something in you, please leave a comment and tell me. I read every one. Have you ever trusted someone who turned out to be keeping a ledger you couldn't see? If this moved you, please like this video, and subscribe to The Silent Diary, where a new woman's truth is told in full every week. Take care of yourselves, and watch who you tell your secrets to. Not everyone who listens is keeping them safe.